The Duke of Wellington, the Russian Winter, Admiral Nelson. History tells us these were the forces that broke Napoleon Bonaparte. But history is hiding something. At the absolute height of his power, the Emperor of Europe was defeated in a single afternoon by an enemy he never saw coming. They were fast, they were coordinated, and there were thousands of them. This is the story of how the greatest military mind of the 19th century was forced to retreat by a horde of fluffy, domesticated bunnies.
When we think of Napoleon Bonaparte, we think of Austerlitz, we think of the crossing of the Alps, we think of a man who redrew the map of the world with gunpowder and genius. By July 1807, Napoleon was effectively a god on earth. He had just signed the treaties of Tilsit, ending the War of the Fourth Coalition. He had crushed the Prussians and made peace with the Russians. The French Empire was at its absolute zenith. To celebrate this monumental achievement, Napoleon proposed a hunt. He wanted a relaxing afternoon of shooting with his top brass and military elite. He handed the logistics of this event to his chief of staff, Alexandre Berthier. Now, Berthier was a brilliant administrator. He could organize supply lines for hundreds of thousands of soldiers, but, as it turns out, he didn't know much about lagomorphic biology. Berthier wanted to impress the emperor, so he didn't just arrange a small hunt, he went big. According to historical accounts, he acquired somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000 rabbits. The plan was simple. Gather the VIPs, release the rabbits, and let the emperor enjoy some target practice. But Berthier had made a fatal calculation. Because he was a busy man, he didn't send gamekeepers out to trap wild hares. Instead, he bought the rabbits from local farmers. This distinction is the key to the disaster that followed. Wild rabbits see a human with a gun and think, "Predator, run." Domesticated farm rabbits see a human standing in a field and think, "That is the guy who brings the lettuce." The day of the hunt arrived. The sun was shining, the military elite were dressed in their finest hunting gear. Napoleon took his position, rifle in hand, ready to demonstrate his marksmanship. Berthier signaled the keepers. The cage doors were flung open. The expectation was an explosion of movement, rabbits scattering in every direction across the field. That is not what happened. Instead, 3,000 rabbits looked at Napoleon Bonaparte, the scourge of Europe, and collectively decided he looked like a giant carrot. They didn't run away, they charged. At first, the generals laughed. It was absurd, a sea of fluff hopping toward them. But the laughter died out quickly when they realized the rabbits weren't stopping. This wasn't a scatter, it was a siege. The rabbits swarmed the party. They weren't attacking to kill, they were swarming for food, expecting dinner. But to the men on the ground, it felt like a tactical assault. Historian David Chandler described it with military precision, noting that the rabbit horde divided into two wings and poured around the flanks of the party. They were executing a classic pincer movement on the French emperor. Napoleon tried to shoo them away, then he tried to kick them away. Then the men began using their riding crops and whips. It was useless. For every rabbit they swatted aside, 5 more took its place. They climbed up the legs of the generals. They gnawed on the gold braid of their jackets. It was absolute chaos. The greatest army in Europe, which had just brought the Russian bear to its knees, was dissolving into panic against a battalion of bunnies. Realizing the position was lost, Napoleon ordered a retreat. He turned and fled towards his imperial carriage. This is the image I want burned into your brain. The man who would march into Moscow was currently sprinting across a field, knees high, pursued by a white wave of twitching noses. He dove into the carriage, but the rabbits were relentless. According to the accounts, the swarm divided again, some continuing the pursuit, others actually leaping into the carriage before the door could be closed. Napoleon was reportedly throwing rabbits out of the window of his moving coach as they sped away. The hunt was a total disaster. Berthier was mortified, and Napoleon? Well, he survived to fight another day, eventually meeting his end at Waterloo. But one has to wonder, as he sat in exile on St. Helena years later, staring at the ocean, did he fear the British, or did he have nightmares about long ears and cottontails? The rabbit attack of 1807 remains the only military encounter where Napoleon Bonaparte was completely routed, proving that while you can conquer nations, you cannot conquer a hungry pet that thinks you have snacks.